Hey there, thanks for joining us today. Our Razorleaf team just got back from the Global Product Data Interoperability Summit, also known as GPDIS, in Phoenix. And wow, there's a lot to unpack. It's one of those events where aerospace and manufacturing leaders come together, even as competitors, to tackle the big challenges around data and digital engineering. We're talking about everything from integration struggles and evolving digital data packages to governance, co-creation, and even the role AI might play in the future. So in the episode, we'll share what stood out, what's changing fast, and why interoperability is still one of the toughest and most important topics in the industry. Let's jump in. Welcome back, everybody, to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering, the podcast about all things digital related to products from engineering to manufacturing, services, and beyond. I'm one of your hosts, Juliann Grant, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Jonathan Scott.
Hello, Juliann.
Hey, Jonathan. So today we're going to switch things around a little bit. Jonathan's going to also be one of our interviewees today because today's episode is we're recapping an industry event that's called GPDIS, which stands for Global Product Data Interoperability Summit. And we have our Razorleaf team here who is in attendance, and they're going to help share some of their insights about what this event was all about, what happened there, what was being talked about, just to give a quick recap on what happened in Arizona last week. So, as I said, it was in Arizona, and the event brings together engineering and manufacturing professionals, primarily in the aerospace and defense industry, but there were other industries there as well, to discuss core data and delivery systems that drives manufacturing forward. So this year's theme was about the digital thread in manufacturing, and they covered topics like things like model-based systems engineering, which we've obviously talked about here, digital twin, digital thread, supply chain, and emerging technologies. So most of you know Jonathan, so I don't have to introduce Jonathan, but I want to make sure I take a minute to introduce my colleagues. So Tony Sicoli, welcome, Tony.
Hello.
Glad to have you.
Thank you, Juliann.
Yes.
Good to see you again, Jonathan, and of course, François.
Yes. So Tony is an account manager at Razorleaf. He's been here with the company about 4 years, and he helps clients meet their needs in PLM, PDM, and MES. And he's been doing that for more than 10 years in general. Tony was in product development and engineering for several years before moving into PLM consulting. And he seeks to guide clients to their solutions to help them meet their business needs. So thanks, Tony. And also François Schlupp. Welcome, François.
How are you, Anne?
Great. We're glad to have you here. François is also one of our account managers, and he's been working at Razorleaf for the past 5 years. And he's been in a sales role in the space of engineering and manufacturing for the last 15 years in Europe and in USA. And he speaks fluent French as well as, of course, American. Or English, sorry. Is it American or is it English? That could be a controversial thing to say today.
I'm trying to figure out.
Great. Well, it's great to have you both here. So, Jonathan, can you get us started with just give us a backdrop of the event? What did you see there when you went?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think a lot of people have not heard of the event. It's one of the reasons why we wanted to do a podcast episode on it, is to make sure more people hear about it in this space. Because it is one of the better kept secrets. It's not doesn't get the publicity that sometimes the vendor shows do and things like that. So a little bit about its history that maybe will give people that context. So it used to be, and used to have the names more prominently in it. It used to be like the Boeing Northrop Grumman GPDIS, right?
Okay.
And it, I don't even remember when it started, but it's more than 15 years ago because I used to go to it back in the day. But it was really formed when a couple of the large aerospace companies wanted some of their key people to get together to talk about interoperability standards, right? So think back 15, 20 years ago, really it was all about CAD. And people were trying to exchange CAD data when we had standards like IGES and STEP, and those were still evolving and some of them were new. And there was a lot of struggle around sharing that data either across supply chains, and I think that was the primary thing, and sometimes in teaming agreements, in defense when you'd see some of the major defense primes work together. And it was a struggle, right? It was very difficult. And so they wanted to put those experts together to talk about it where they could, right? Where it wasn't competitive. And the idea and the event just grew out of that. So sort of fast forward to now, that's the context I wanted to share about it. Today, you still have big sponsors like Boeing and Northrop Grumman. Now Lockheed is one of the major sponsors. There are several other major sponsors, and I won't get them all right, so I'm not trying to leave anybody out. You can find all that stuff on the website of the event. But you have other folks, Airbus. You have people who are competing head-to-head, but they're getting together to collaborate about these interoperability topics. And lots of people in the supply chain and people in other industries too. But that's kind of the nature of it. Now, it's grown from that CAD topic to lots of interoperability things around digital data. But that's kind of the flavor I would give. But, François and Tony, jump in, please. Add more to that from what you guys saw there.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Jonathan, for that overview. I really think it was a gathering of industry people and vendors, and as well as, like you said, OEMs and suppliers to the industry, to really talk through, hey, what are we doing with PLM? What are we doing with MES? And how are we integrating those? How are we using that? How can we do that in the most future-facing way? That was kind of a thing I saw there. I don't know if any one of you have a different view.
No, but I think you touched on something, Tony, that I forgot to mention, right? From those interoperability, the early roots, is it was not always just about the exchanges across companies, kind of like I was implying, but also the exchange across systems and functions, right? So I'm glad you highlighted that, because I think that was a big thing that got talked about too.
I would add that many of our participants came with the system engineering background. Not all of them, but a good portion of people were engineers who are trying to implement MBSE in their companies. So a lot of people on the business side, really. Also for people from product design, from manufacturing. A few people also from the IT organizations for these large companies supporting these systems that Tony, you just mentioned. So that was a nice crowd. And I think that people from high-level system requirement to people who want to deliver and manufacture the product. So that was interesting to have this complete vision of the company.
That's interesting about when you get these kinds of groups of folks together who are, typically competitors, Airbus and Lockheed and Boeing. There's usually sometimes hesitation. I know from the marketing side, it's always hard to get them to want to share information. So how was the sharing of information and collaboration amongst the attendees at the event?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think there's a lot of effort to be collaborative. I saw people from competing organizations, let's say, someone from Airbus and someone from Boeing would be in the crowd, and the person from Boeing would challenge, would say, come up with a question, and and I thought that was very collaborative. That they weren't holding things back. They were really probing and trying to understand. So I think it was fairly collaborative.
And this industry is very very complex, and we can see that many of these companies sometimes are competitors, sometimes are partners, sometimes one is the supplier to OEM. So I felt that the space was very open, and people were really no one was sharing secrets, but everyone was very willing to solve this issue together. And I think people understand that this is an ecosystem challenge that these industries have, and that they will all benefit from learning one from the other.
I think that's exactly right, François. That's what I heard plenty of discussions around, we have to come together and do this, because what we all need to make this work is standards. And things won't be standards if one of us tries to dictate it to our supply chain or our value chain. We have to come together to figure it out. I'll even give you an example of a session that was a great case in point of that. So the session was a presentation between from Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, who had done a joint project related to model interoperability, and they had worked with both Purdue and Georgia Tech to do this project. So they were just reporting on this at GPDIS, but the collaboration on it had happened for more than a year ahead of time. So it's, I think the event is sort of I don't want to say a symptom, but a sign of the work that they are already doing together, and they're coming together to talk about it and share it. So it felt very collaborative to me too.
That's really good news. So let's talk a little bit about the themes of the event. What did you hear this year?
Yeah, I can jump in on that. One of the themes that I heard was, AI is always a big topic for everyone. But
yes,
it was people challenged each other on, some people were AI everything. Other people were like, not so fast, not so fast. One of the examples I heard someone say is they actually put through Google AI a question about the functionality in one of the vendors. It's Team Center's functionality, and it gave an answer. Google AI gave an answer. He went back and asked the folks at Siemens, and they're like, no, it doesn't do that. That's not correct.
So AI wasn't 100% correct. Okay.
Correct. They're telling like, no. And then what was the comment I heard? How many? Yeah, I remember the guy said, everybody raise your hand. Who wants to fly in a plane completely built by AI?
All the hands went down. Or no hands went up.
We all like,
yeah, negative. Yeah, that would be super scary.
So that's one point. I don't know. I have a couple other, but
I'll jump in with another one. Another theme that I heard, and this was the focus of the workshop at the beginning. So I guess we didn't really talk about the event itself, but it was 2 main days of event with a vendor area, like Technofair kind of thing, but lots of sessions during those days. But there was a pre-event, the one day ahead of time. There was a workshop focused on MBSE and manufacturing. So that was sort of a theme. I wouldn't say that was a theme of the whole event, but that was a big theme and an interesting topic. Some assertions by different people. They're kind of trying to be provocative, throw the opinion out there, get the discussion going about the idea that MBSE belongs on the factory floor. The production system is in and of itself a system, and it needs model-based systems engineering, that kind of idea. So that was a thread throughout, that there were a number of topics on that. So that was another one I heard.
Yeah, a third one I would add, and this would be no surprise, is integration. How do we build a digital thread across these different systems, and even sometimes beyond the companies? How do you build digital thread with your suppliers or your partners? So that was a very strong topic also.
So is the digital thread something that you heard that folks are struggling with at the event, or that's obviously it was a theme of the event, or the main theme that they published? So what were there any sort of surprises around that?
I had a surprise around that. It was interesting. I went to a couple sessions because there were some acronyms I hadn't heard of before, and I'll get into a little bit of a story here. But one of the sessions was around TDP, technical data packages, DDP, digital data packages, and some standards that are starting to evolve or starting to be formed. And one was named Cascade. And there were several sessions on this, so I'm sort of blending together what I heard at different ones. But the surprise that I'll share there is I thought, well, digital data package, that's probably some kind of evolution of TDP and technical data package. And what I learned as I dove into it is, yes, it's a standard that's being evolved. Maybe it's not even fair to call it a standard. It's somewhere in process. Maybe it's there. I'm not quite sure. But the idea is that it's more of a catalog to point to digital data in other places. So a technical data package, right? It's got the technical data in it. You send it to somebody, you share it with them. A digital data package is more sharing the map to digital data with someone in a standard way. So it might be sharing MBSE models and other models and lots of context that's pointing to other things. And I was not expecting that. and I'm not sure exactly what it means for the integration space and that kind of thing. And this cascade was another thing that got mentioned there. That's it's a standard and it's an acronym. I have it written down. Collaborative Artifact Specification Context and Data Exchange. So hopefully that spells cascade-ish. But it was something related to DDP and TDP. And so this was a surprise for me that there's something evolving and new there that I guess we all need to be paying attention to as it relates to interoperability.
Interesting. So I wonder if that DDP, is it, so when I think of a TDP, I think of it as it's got all the documents, all the data, everything in it. So a DDP might not have it, maybe more link-oriented with just pointing to different files and things.
That's right. And they talked a little bit about it could be different formats. There's a DDP that could be in a PDF form with lots of metadata in it that then points to where those other data sources are, or it could be a zip file form. But it was interesting that it's not supposed to have the content, it's supposed to have the pointers. So yeah, I'm still trying to understand it, but it was an interesting topic that got raised.
Interesting. François, what did you hear? Anything interesting?
On integration, I would say more based on the discussions I had with the different participants. But it's still an immature domain. And companies are building tactical integration because they see a very interesting ROI to integrate PLM and ERP. But no one, even though people are thinking about it, no one has achieved a grand vision of integration and really deploying a real digital thread. So what I see is that we have a lot of work, a lot of things to achieve and we're not done with integration, but will keep us busy and we'll be talking about it for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that reminds me of the keynote, I think, on day 2, day 1 of the real conference, François, but I think it was the 2 folks from Boeing who were talking about this evolution that today we have so many point-to-point integrations, and even though we think that's exposing our data and getting our data where it needs to be, reality is it's not. It's still in silos between those 2 points that you've connected. And what we really need is hub and spoke, access to all the data where it lives, that kind of stuff. To me, that was a great evidence of exactly what you're saying, the immaturity of where we're at, even though people are doing lots of things in that space.
Interesting. Tony, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I did hear a lot of people came to our booth and asked about integration, and that was often the first thing they said on Hub and Spoke. They said, would you recommend Hub and Spoke? Or, do you have something that can help with a Hub and Spoke integration? And there are a lot of people that had interest in the digital thread, and they connected that to Hub and Spoke integration. So I don't know if that's adding to it, but I would confirm I heard similar things there as well.
Yeah, well, let's build on that a little bit. So you're talking about some conversations at the booth. What kinds of use cases were you hearing, either in presentations or in your conversations?
Typically, like one use case in particular, I won't mention the company, integrating ERP, PLM, MES, and MBSE tool, and so I thought that wanted that all integrated, all sharing information, model data, MBSE, digital thread, able, if you will, if I can use that word. So yeah, I thought it was interesting, and most people were definitely connecting either an MBSE tool to PLM or MES or an MBSE tool to just directly to PLM. But that was the type of use cases I heard. I don't know, Jonathan or François, if you heard differently.
I heard a lot of that. heard a lot of things about integration. Yeah, go ahead, François.
I heard a lot of willingness to do it, but whether it is integration or deploying MBSE, I saw one for many of the companies I met with. I saw one major challenge, and it is that they are very large organizations. They have design and built some product equipment 10, 15 years ago, and there's systems on which they design, on which they help also in the manufacturing of these products. It's as old as the initial product. So it's a big challenge for many of these companies. Before they can do any integration or before they can deploy any MBSE solution, they have to update their current IT systems. I heard some people who are using some 2007 version of PLM solution. And these solutions are not,
Did you say 2007 or what was it? What did I hear?
Yeah, 2007.
Okay.
Yes. And you're not going to deploy new technologies on these solutions. That would not work. So one of the big challenges for them is let's adopt new versions of these solutions or more modern technology before we start talking about digital thread or MBSE. And that's very difficult for them because it's a lot. I mean, these solutions are, when you touch something, you have to touch many other systems. So I see that many are stuck in the past and have a hard time going forward because of the legacy solutions.
So I'll jump in with a few things that I heard, Juliann, and they're not all necessarily use cases, but topics that came up that I thought were interesting. And this maybe gives people a flavor, too, of the event and kind of the broad set of topics that get covered, right? So it's not just aerospace, right? Which is, based on the context, you might think that. So one of the other keynotes was from John Dyke at SESME, right? And this is the Smart Manufacturing Institute in the US. And in his keynote, he talked a lot about manufacturing. And so that was, again, kind of one of the themes. But he touched on one example of why it's important to have standards and bring people together at things like national institutes to talk about data and data standards. And he mentioned the digital product passport was an example he gave, right? This ties right back to that integration point that François and Tony were making. He showed this chart of all of the pieces of metadata that you need to have a digital product passport. And if you haven't heard that term before, this is something that's becoming a regulatory requirement in Europe. And a lot of US companies, global companies, need to understand it, need to be tracking the information for it so that they can sell to those markets, right? And his point was, if you think about where all this data comes from, it's going to make your head hurt. Are you ready for this? And it was amazing. I can't even remember what the counts were. He had all the numbers on there about, it's 80 some pieces of metadata that you need. And they come in at different times of the product lifecycle from different systems, either from your supplier, yourself, from your customer, all these areas. And his point was, you've got to think about this, how you're going to standardize it and collect it, or it's going to cost you a ton of money to chase it all down. So to me, it was a great example of how the event can be really focused on some cases, right? MBSE and models and that sort of thing and exchanging data. It's very aerospace specific. And then it can broaden right back out to something that's applicable to anybody making a product and something to think about how these themes impact everybody.
Well, it's interesting because the theme, and like I said, the marketing of the event was around the digital thread, which is a strategic approach to this. But then it also sounds like there's just a little bit of people being stuck in sort of this tactical point-to-point approach to connecting a digital thread, which seems counterintuitive, right? It seems like you must be missing something. And to your point about this, to prepare for a digital product passport, you really have to take a step back and really look at all the moving parts of what you're trying to capture. Right?
That's another thing that's so great about the event is, like you said, you can see both sides of it. There's this sort of big theoretical, what I need to do, what I need to have for the future. And then you come back and zoom in on this very tactical, what do I need to do to get there? Where am I at today? I'll give you another example of that. Boeing has this concept, I guess it's a framework, called the Boeing Supplier Engagement Framework. And I heard several sessions that referenced this and talked about it, and they shared it openly, right? It's another great example of collaboration. It wasn't something that they said, hey, this is proprietary, how we deal with our supply chain. They were willing to share it. It was great, though, because it talks about how they think about engaging with suppliers from the simplest kind of engagement. Maybe they are sharing a drawing or a model with that supplier and asking them to make that part, to the more complex scenarios where they've got design partners and they're working together in a PLM, exchanging data, models, MBSE, et cetera. But they have this whole framework that's a step-by-step, how they figure out the maturity levels of the collaboration, what they want to share, how they want to do it. And it was just it was a great topic to me because you could see people engaging with it because it was so tactical, yet it addressed a big problem.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you can see, a company like that would have some level of process in managing its suppliers, but being able to share that and get a little bit of insight on how that all stacks up, and what are the touch points would be super helpful for some other companies in that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anything else before I take a stab at summarizing what I heard? So it sounds like an interesting event for sure. I wish I was there.
Yeah, I did have one other point. Again, going back to the second day keynote speech, there's a prominent point that the presenter made about engineering and IT needing to co-create digital thread and to be equally involved in that. And I think that's a challenge with a lot of organizations. We see that in our work, that it's really difficult to get both camps to, I like the word they use, co-create. You can have co-responsibility, but actually co-create to give mutual input to what does this need to look like from an infrastructure perspective, and what does this need to look like from a business specification perspective. So, I thought that was an interesting viewpoint. The answer that was given was basically to have the team focus on the project versus their separate camps. I think, Jonathan, you and I were talking about that. But I don't know if there's other viewpoints to that, but that is definite. We have these big ideas about what we'd like to do, but the teams have to co-create to make it the best workable solution.
It's an interesting self-selecting group at GPDIS, which hears that and they're like, yes, we should absolutely do that. It's funny. I think the challenge that a lot of our customers feel is that often they will have I'll call it digital engineering expertise, either in IT or in engineering, but it's sort of a scarce resource, scarce skill set. So you don't always find it all around in a way that says, yeah, take those experts out of engineering, take those experts out of IT, put them together and let them work on a problem. At this event, sure, they were there, but at lots of places it's like, well, IT maybe doesn't understand the digital engineering, or the engineering people who know software maybe don't understand all the digital sides that IT does. So I thought it was a really well-made point. I'm glad you brought that one up.
The last session I attended was around PLM governance. It was from a very large defense manufacturer. And they had built a very structured governance around PLM, meaning that any new enhancement, for example, will go into a board. And the board, you have representatives from engineering, from IT, and we will have criteria to select how to select the enhancements and when they should be deployed. And they also have another level of governance for the roadmap. And that gives a lot of clarity to all the parties. And also, for companies which are stuck, as I said previously, with all technologies and are not taking investment for a long time, I think that this is what many times by miss. There's no official governance. And so I thought that was very interesting, and I understand that this company has been successful in deploying this for PLM, and they're looking at expanding this to other systems, such as ERP or MES.
It's fascinating, right? Some companies will deploy something and then sort of forget about it and let it die. And other companies, there's so much contention, they need a board to sort out what they want to do.
Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I think that the event sounded great. It sounded like there was a lot of opportunity for learning. It's a classic technical event where you have a mixed group of people who, like for model-based systems engineers, you could probably get a little bit more deeper into the tactics of, some of the models that are being built to support manufacturing and, bringing products to market in the aerospace and defense sector. So I could see where that was. But then there was also the opportunity to step back and say, okay, well, we have this digital thread we have to put together now. Up to this point, it's showing the progression of the maturity of the market where, it's mostly point-to-point integrations, and people have kind of just sort of, plug the dam and, put holes in the dam to just plug it and get the information from one point to another. But sounds like that there was a good opportunity here to discuss, take a step back and say, okay, well, what do we really need to be doing? What are some of the things that are coming our way? So, you talked about the progression of TDPs to digital data packages where, things are moving out of, putting everything in a one big fat PDF into more of a link-driven and, go find the information and have a little bit more fluidity to it. So if something changes, it's easier to make the change. And then there's, the fact that, there's things happening in Europe that are going to end up making our lives different here in the US. So the digital product passport will certainly have some of those challenges. And so people need to start thinking about how they're going to meet that. And that requires looking at integration in a very different way, in a much more strategic way. So no more, while point-to-point does work, it's not a long-term strategy for helping evolve, right, and stay pace with where the market's going. So, and smart manufacturing, of course, also drives that. So, it's not just an engineering data problem. It flows right into the manufacturing side, and, the MES systems all have to comply. And as François, you was talking about governance. Governance is, one of the things that's very difficult to do when you're moving across all these functions and even the supply chain, but some level of a view of that needs to happen. So that's kind of what I heard. Is that an accurate reflection here? I don't know if I summarize as well as you do, Jonathan, but
No, I think you heard a lot of what we had to say exactly right. That really puts the event in a nutshell, I think.
Great. Well, I'm really glad we had an opportunity for Razorleaf to participate this year. I know we've always had trouble with that schedule, with things that we have going on here. So I'm glad the team could be there, and highly recommend the event for others to check out, even if you're not in aerospace and defense, but you're wrestling with integration, interoperability, things like that. So it's a great event to go and get a snapshot of what some others in the market are doing. So,
and actually, that's a great point to make real quick. I mean, for any of those listening in the defense industry, you don't need, a DD 242? I forget the form name, but it's not sensitive data, right? So it's an open conference and anybody can attend.
Oh, great. Good point. That's good. That's like, as opposed to some of the others, the defense and manufacturing conference and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time today. We appreciate you listening in. If you have any comments to add to the GPDIS and you attended, please add that to our comments. We'd love to hear what you had to say or what you saw. But we appreciate you being here with us. And please give a like to our post if you enjoyed this conversation. And you can always recommend some other ideas for us to talk about, as we're always talking about integration, interoperability, and digital thread and digital twin. So those are always hot topics for us. So please give us a comment or two if you have some thoughts on that. And we'd love to hear from you. So with that, everybody, thanks, François. Thanks, Tony. And thanks, Jonathan. It's a great conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you for...
Sounds good.
Letting me come.
Yeah, always great to have you. And with that, we hope everybody stays sharp. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering with Razorleaf. If you like this podcast, please be sure to hit that like button. We'd really appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform, or check us out on YouTube. If you have any questions, just leave us a comment on our post or send us an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. Till next time, everybody, stay sharp.